At 69, James Lofton finally reached the point in life where the noise of stadiums fades, the highlight reels settle into silence, and only the truths he never spoke out loud remain. For decades, he was the prototype of the modern deep threat, a receiver who turned pure speed into a weapon that terrified defenses across the league. Fans remember the grace, the elegance, the long strides that seemed to swallow entire fields. What they never saw were the fractures underneath the shine, the rivalries that shaped him, the grudges that pushed him, the secrets he carried through locker rooms, plane rides, and cold winter sidelines. His story has always been told in numbers and records, yards, touchdowns, Pro Bowls. Yet the real James Lofton lived behind moments of conflict that defined him far more than any stat sheet. Battles with teammates who challenged his place, coaches who doubted his discipline, defensive backs who hunted him with a personal mission, league politics that cornered him when he least expected it. These are the 6 hidden truths he rarely acknowledged. The truths that explain why a Hall of Fame legend built from beauty and precision carried so much intensity behind his eyes. Why did a receiver so gifted become a magnet for tension? How did a career so smooth on the surface hide storms that almost changed everything? And why at 69 did he finally decide to reveal what really shaped him? Before the conflicts, before the hidden truths, James Lofton was known simply as the receiver who moved like light. Born into an era when the passing game was still finding its identity, he entered the league as something entirely new. Coaches tried to describe him with old vocabulary, but none of it fit. He was not just fast. He was long-balanced and impossibly smooth a glider who could turn a 40-yard sprint into a poetic sequence that left defenders reaching for air. When the Green Bay Packers drafted him in the late 1970s, they believed they were getting a gifted athlete. What they received instead was a blueprint for the modern deep threat. His presence changed the geometry of every field he stepped on. Safeties were forced to retreat. Cornerbacks knew their margin for error was paper thin. Quarterbacks discovered that even a slightly mistimed ball could still become a highlight when Lofton extended his arms and erased the distance between possibility and completion. Yet brilliance always attracts scrutiny. And for Lofton, excellence did not shield him from the emotional battles that simmered within competitive locker rooms. He played in an era ruled by toughness and uncompromising expectations. Veterans expected young stars to earn every inch of respect. Coaches demanded absolute discipline. Team owners valued production but were quick to question personality. Lofton, with his elegance and confidence, sometimes clashed with a football culture that believed pain, grit, and harsh edges were the only things that built champions. His style was clean and refined, and that alone sparked quiet judgments behind closed doors. As his career expanded to Buffalo, Los Angeles, and beyond, Lofton found himself crossing paths with teammates driven by jealousy, coaches carrying old grudges, and defenders who treated every play against him as a personal vendetta. He was admired on the field, yet challenged off it. The deeper he climbed into the league's upper tiers, the more he became surrounded by pressures that demanded emotional armor. But hidden inside all of this was something more subtle. Lofton was a perfectionist. Every dropped pass felt like a fracture in his identity. Every criticism, no matter how small, lingered longer than it should have. Behind his graceful roots lived a fierce inner voice that demanded excellence and fueled tensions when others questioned his fire. This is the stage on which the 5 rivalries, conflicts, and untold truths took shape. They did not come from weakness. They came from the collision between a rare talent and a league that demanded constant proof of toughness. Some relationships broke. Some grudges deepened. Some moments would follow him long after retirement. These are the origins of the countdown. Before James Lofton became the polished Hall of Fame icon the league celebrates today, he first had to survive the harsh initiation every young receiver faced. And nothing tested him more deeply than his early conflict with a veteran cornerback in Green Bay. The league remembers this defender as a hard-nosed technician, a player who thrived on intimidation and subtle psychological warfare. To him, rookies were not teammates. They were intruders who needed to be broken before they earned a voice in the room. Lofton walked into this world with world-class speed, clean routes, and quiet confidence. That combination immediately triggered the veteran's suspicion. From their first practice together, tension grew like a storm waiting to break. Lofton understood competition. He had spent his life battling for every inch of opportunity. But this was different. Every rep became a message. Every collision carried extra force. The corner wanted to remind him that talent meant nothing without hierarchy. And Lofton, young but proud, refused to shrink. His ability to glide past defenders in college did not prepare him for an opponent who attacked him with words, elbows, and relentless scrutiny. Their clash was not just athletic, it was personal. The root of the conflict was simple. The veteran believed Lofton was being celebrated too quickly. Green Bay needed a star. Lofton looked like one. Coaches praised him. Teammates noticed him. The media followed him. The veteran hated every moment of it. He had fought for years to keep his job. He saw Lofton as the symbol of a changing NFL where athletic gifts were prioritized over experience. So he took it upon himself to challenge the rookie at every turn. The defining moment came during a mid-season practice when frustration boiled over. Lofton beat him clean on a deep route. Not once, not twice. 3 consecutive reps. The corner snapped on the 4th. As Lofton elevated for a routine catch, he was hit in mid-air with a level of force that had nothing to do with football technique. Teammates immediately noticed it. Coaches froze. The silence that followed said everything. Lofton hit the ground hard, his breath knocked out. His confidence rattled for a split second, but he refused to stay down. He got up, slowly walked back to the line and signaled for the next rep. No yelling. No retaliation, just a cold, unspoken message of his own. It was the moment the locker room finally saw who he really was. Not just the elegant deep threat on Sundays, not just the smooth runner on highlight tapes. He was tougher than he looked. The veteran realized it too. For the first time, doubt cracked through the hostility. He never apologized. He never admitted Lofton had earned his respect. But the aggression eased. The constant jabs softened. The rivalry never completely disappeared, yet it transformed into something quieter and more complicated. For Lofton, this was one of the first scars of his NFL life. It taught him that talent alone would never shield him, that the league could be beautiful and brutal in the same breath, and that some battles would follow him for years, shaping the fire that drove his perfectionism. Every great career carries a shadow. For James Lofton, one of the longest and deepest came not from a rival player, but from a coach whose philosophy clashed with everything that made Lofton who he was. The league knew this coach as a demanding tactician who valued discipline above all else. He believed football was built from grit, repetition, and unyielding effort. Lofton, with his effortless stride and quiet demeanor, represented the opposite in the coach's eyes. To him, Lofton's elegance looked like detachment. His calmness looked like ego. The coach could not see the relentless perfection behind Lofton's smooth exterior. He saw brilliance, but he did not see hunger, and that misunderstanding became the foundation of their long-running conflict. It began the moment Lofton arrived. During film sessions, the coach often paused on Lofton's routes, drawing attention to the smallest details. He questioned his footwork, his leverage, his intensity. Even when Lofton executed perfectly, the coach found cracks to point at. Lofton interpreted this as personal. He felt targeted. The coach believed he was pushing a gifted athlete to maximize his talent. Lofton felt like he was being diminished. Over time, tension simmered through the room each time their eyes met. The core of the conflict came from philosophy. Lofton believed in flow timing and instinct. He played the game like a dancer who felt movements rather than forced them. The coach believed in rigid structure, strict steps, and absolute obedience. He wanted receivers to be machines. Lofton was born to be an artist, and neither side could fully bend toward the other. Their breaking point came during a late-season stretch when the offense hit a slump. The coach publicly questioned Lofton's consistency. Reporters gathered around his locker the next day, repeating the criticism word for word. Lofton felt exposed. Worse, he felt betrayed. He confronted the coach privately. Voices rose. Staff heard it through closed doors. For a few minutes, the team's future Hall of Famer and its uncompromising coach clashed in a storm of competing ideals. Lofton defended his work ethic. The coach insisted he needed more. The air in the room felt like it might split. But the most defining moment arrived on a cold Sunday afternoon. The team needed a spark. The coach, still doubtful, called a play that forced Lofton into a contested deep ball, almost as if testing his resolve. Lofton responded with one of the most iconic catches of his early career, stretching fully above a defender and crashing to the turf with the ball pinned to his chest. The stadium erupted. The sideline exploded. Yet the coach stood still, arms crossed. No applause, no acknowledgement. Lofton jogged back to the bench without a smile. He did not need praise anymore. The play itself was the message. His teammates never forgot that moment. It became the silent symbol of their relationship. Lofton delivering greatness, while the coach refused to yield. Their tension never truly faded. Years later, when Lofton entered the Hall of Fame, he thanked many people. But not this coach. He respected the coach's knowledge, but the wound of never being seen for who he truly was never healed. Wide receivers and quarterbacks live in a partnership built on timing, rhythm, and belief. When it works, it feels like a conversation without words. When it fails, the cracks spread through an offense like cold wind. For James Lofton, one of the most lingering conflicts of his career came with a quarterback whose style, personality, and insecurities collided with his own in ways that neither man ever fully resolved. They were supposed to be the engine of the team. Instead, they became two gifted athletes working beside each other rather than with each other. The tension began quietly, long before fans noticed anything. In early practices, the quarterback often hesitated on deep throws to Lofton. Coaches saw it on tape. Teammates whispered about it. Lofton would break free with his trademark glide, creating separation in a way few receivers in the league could. But the ball came late, or short, or not at all. Lofton felt the mistrust instantly. He had spent his whole life proving himself through precision, discipline, and performance. Now he was relying on someone who didn't fully believe in the very skill that defined him. The quarterback came from a different mold. He trusted structure more than instinct. He preferred short timing routes over explosive deep plays. Lofton represented the vertical aggression the coach wanted, but not the style the quarterback felt comfortable with. Their philosophies clashed. Lofton ran routes with the freedom of a track athlete who understood spacing intuitively. The quarterback wanted rigid landmarks. When Lofton adjusted mid-route to exploit a defender's mistake, the quarterback saw unpredictability, not brilliance. And that disconnect slowly grew into quiet resentment. Then came the moment that crystallized everything. A nationally televised game in the heart of a playoff push. The offense sputtered early. Lofton repeatedly beat his coverage down the sideline, signaling with subtle hand gestures that he had leverage. But the quarterback looked away, checking down again and again as frustration built through the stadium. On the sidelines, Lofton finally approached him, speaking calmly but firmly about the openings he kept creating. The quarterback snapped back, accusing him of freelancing routes and making reads harder. Cameras caught only fragments of their exchange. The full heat stayed between them. Late in the game, the coach dialed up a deep shot designed specifically for Lofton. The quarterback hesitated at the snap, holding the ball a split second too long. When he finally released it, the timing was gone. The ball floated off target. Lofton still made a heroic effort, leaping, twisting his body, extending both hands. The ball grazed his fingertips and fell incomplete. The crowd gasped. The quarterback pointed subtly at Lofton. Lofton walked back to the huddle without looking at him. The aftermath lingered for years. Analysts blamed miscommunication. Coaches blamed execution. Teammates quietly chose sides. Lofton never said a harsh word publicly, but behind closed doors he admitted that trust had evaporated long before that moment. In a league built on partnership, their connection had become a fragile truce. They respected each other. They needed each other. They never truly believed in each other. When Lofton finally left the team, that fractured relationship remained one of the private regrets of his career. Not because of animosity, but because of what they could have been together if trust had ever taken root. He knew the quarterback feared mistakes more than he believed in greatness, and Lofton never forgot it. Some rivalries are built from competition. Others are forged from something sharper, colder, and far more personal. For James Lofton, one of the most intense and emotionally charged conflicts of his career came from a defensive back who treated every snap against him like a private war. The league remembers this defender for his swagger, his trash talk, and his willingness to push every boundary the rules allowed. To him, covering Lofton was not a job. It was a mission. And Lofton, with his composure and elegance, was everything the defender believed needed to be torn apart. Their history began early in Lofton's career, back when he was still establishing himself. The defensive back saw the rising star, heard the praise, watched the highlights, and decided he wanted to be the man who broke the myth. He believed Lofton was too smooth, too polished, too graceful. In his mind, real football was played with grit and bruises, not elegance and stride length. So he made Lofton the central target of his psychological warfare. Every time they lined up across from each other, the defender delivered a barrage of words meant to rattle even the strongest mind. Lofton rarely engaged. His silence only infuriated the defender further. Their conflict escalated through a series of matchups that felt like heavyweight fights. The defender grabbed, held, and struck at the edge of legality. He wanted to turn Lofton's rhythm into chaos. He wanted to expose him. And Lofton, who valued timing and precision, had to transform his game every time they faced off. He had to become more physical, more aggressive, more willing to fight for every inch. Their battles became some of the most watched in the division, even if the league never advertised them as such. The defining moment arrived during a high-stakes late-season game with playoff implications. The stadium shook with cold weather and tension. On the first deep attempt of the night, Lofton exploded off the line. The defender grabbed a fistful of jersey, pulling him violently before the ball even reached its apex. Flags flew, but the defender stared straight at Lofton with a grin that carried a challenge. Later in the same game, Lofton returned the message. He beat the defender with a double move, so sharp that it sent him stumbling, and Lofton sprinted untouched for a touchdown that electrified the crowd. As he crossed the goal line, he did not celebrate. He simply placed the ball on the turf, walked back to the sideline, and let the scoreboard speak for him. But the rivalry escalated again when, on a crucial third down, the defender struck Lofton with a forearm to the helmet as the ball arrived. The hit was borderline illegal, a flash of frustration disguised as competitiveness. Lofton lay on the turf for a moment, not injured but shaken by the intensity. When he rose, he locked eyes with the defender for the first time, and something shifted. The composure, the patience, the restraint all hardened into something steel-edged. From that moment forward, Lofton attacked every route with a fire that stunned even his coaches. The game ended with Lofton finishing as the decisive factor. The defenders stormed off the field without shaking hands. The rivalry continued for years, each matchup holding its own stories, its own tensions, its own quiet scars. Lofton never hated him, but he never forgot him. And the defender, even in retirement, carried the sting of knowing that Lofton beat him where it mattered most. For all the rivalries James Lofton faced on the field, none shaped him more profoundly than the quiet, ongoing conflict he carried with the very organization that drafted him. It was never a single person. It was the system around him. Coaches, executives, media handlers, and decision-makers who believed that a star receiver should fit into a narrow mold. Lofton was expected to be grateful, obedient, and silent. But he was more thoughtful than they realized, more outspoken, more aware of how the league portrayed him and how easily narratives could be twisted. And this tension between individuality and institutional control became the greatest hidden truth of his career. The conflict began early when Lofton entered the league as a polished, educated athlete who spoke with clarity and composure. The organization admired his talent, but grew uneasy with the influence he gained. Reporters gravitated toward him. He articulated ideas about leadership and performance with a calm authority uncommon for a young player. The team worried he might become bigger than the system. They wanted stars, but only stars they could shape. And Lofton was not someone who could be shaped easily. Behind closed doors, executives tried steering him away from speaking too openly about coaching decisions, locker room dynamics, or the team's direction. Lofton wanted accountability at every level. He expected honesty. He believed that being a professional meant addressing problems directly. But the organization believed silence protected stability. They feared candid athletes. They feared athletes who thought for themselves. Lofton, with his intelligence and poise, became a challenge to manage. The tension grew in seasons when the team struggled. Lofton remained productive, but concerns about leadership and chemistry leaked into the media. The organization quietly allowed narratives to form that placed subtle blame on Lofton's demeanor. They framed him as distant, as overly polished, as someone who didn't fit the culture. Lofton felt the sting of this more deeply than any hit he ever took on a field. He knew what was being done. He knew he was being reshaped into a character the organization could control, and he resented it. The breaking point came during a critical off-season meeting. Lofton requested more input on the offensive direction, not as a demand, but as a veteran leader seeking clarity. This was interpreted as rebellion. Executives pushed back. They emphasized hierarchy. They warned him not to confuse talent with power. The message was unmistakable. His voice was not welcome. His perspective, no matter how valuable, was secondary to organizational optics. Shortly after, discussions began quietly behind the scenes about whether Lofton had become too independent. Trade conversations surfaced. The team framed moves as strategic, but Lofton knew deeper reasons lingered beneath the surface. He was not being traded for lack of production. He was being moved because he refused to shrink, because he refused to be molded, because he wanted transparency in a system that feared transparency. Years later, looking back, Lofton admitted privately that leaving the team that drafted him felt like a wound that never completely healed. He cared about the franchise. He had given them his youth, his body, his brilliance. Yet, in return, the organization attempted to quiet the qualities that made him a leader. He understood football. He understood conflict. But he never understood why a team would fear a player who simply wanted clarity and truth. Lofton forgave players, coaches, and rivals. But he never forgave the system that tried to silence him. Not every rivalry that shaped James Lofton came from enemies. Some came from men who wore the same jersey, shared the same locker room, and fought beside him on Sundays. Among them was one teammate whose talent, ambition, and pride created a quiet but unmistakable tension that shadowed their years together. He was a receiver too gifted in his own right, hungry for recognition, and unwilling to stand in anyone's shadow. And Lofton, already a rising star, unintentionally became the obstacle he could never climb over. Their relationship began respectfully. Both wanted to win. Both understood the demands of the position. But as Lofton's highlights filled television screens and his name became synonymous with explosive plays, the teammate felt increasingly overlooked. Coaches viewed Lofton as the primary weapon. Quarterbacks trusted him on critical downs. Media gravitated toward him. It was never Lofton's intention to overshadow anyone, but football does not distribute glory evenly, and jealousy once planted grows quickly. The turning point came during a stretch when the offense struggled. Reporters asked the teammate about chemistry. His responses were sharp, carefully worded, but pointed. He questioned the distribution of targets. He hinted at imbalance. Lofton noticed. The locker room noticed. Coaches tried to diffuse it, but the seed had taken root. Their most visible moment came on the sideline during a high-pressure game. TV cameras caught a tense exchange between them after a miscommunication on a route. Fans speculated. Analysts debated. Inside the team, the truth was simple. The teammate believed he deserved equal stature. Lofton believed the game dictated its own hierarchy. Over time, respect returned, though the rivalry never fully dissolved. They were never enemies, but they were never fully at ease. Lofton understood competition. What he never forgot was how ambition, even within a brotherhood, can quietly turn into resentment. When the dust of rivalry settles and the years begin to stretch behind a man, the shape of a career becomes easier to see. For James Lofton, the picture that emerged was not simply the story of a brilliant receiver or a Hall of Fame resume built from precision and grace. It was a journey forged through resistance, shaped by conflict, and defined by the quiet fire he carried beneath the elegance that fans adored. Every hidden truth from his past did not weaken his legacy. It sharpened it. The struggles with teammates, coaches, rivals, and even the system around him formed the backbone of the player he became. Lofton was never just a deep threat. He was a study in resilience. The veteran corner who tried to rough him into submission taught him that talent means little without resolve. That moment in practice when he stood up after the violent mid-air hit was more than an act of toughness. It was his first declaration to the league. He would not fold. He would not retreat. He could be targeted, but he could not be broken. From the coach who questioned his commitment, he learned that greatness often comes with misunderstanding. Lofton played the game with such fluid ease that observers mistook it for detachment. The coach's relentless scrutiny and cold demeanor forced Lofton to trust his own identity. He could not please everyone. He could only perfect himself. That iconic contested catch, delivered moments after public criticism, became a quiet testament to his artistry. It showed the world that his smoothness was not softness. His composure was not weakness. His calm was not complacency. It was mastery. The quarterback who hesitated to trust him taught him one of the harshest lessons of professional football. No matter how gifted a receiver may be, he is still dependent on another's belief. Their fractured relationship underscored the thin line between collaboration and tension. Lofton carried the sting of that partnership for years, not because of anger, but because of potential unrealized. He had the skill. The quarterback had the arm. Yet, without trust, their chemistry never ignited into greatness. It showed Lofton that even in a game built on unity, individual insecurities could derail what might have been extraordinary. The defensive back who turned every matchup into a personal war etched something different into Lofton's character. Their rivalry pushed him into a realm of competitiveness he had never reached before. The physicality, the trash talk, the borderline illegal hits all carved steel into Lofton's mindset. Each violent collision taught him that beauty on the field must coexist with brutality. And when Lofton finally responded with fire of his own, beating the defender in the most crucial moments, he learned the power of controlled aggression. He discovered that even his most elegant performances were rooted in a core of unshakable intensity. But the deepest conflict, the one that cast its shadow over entire chapters of his career, came from the organization that drafted him. Lofton entered the league with intelligent self-awareness and a clear voice. Instead of celebrating those qualities, the organization sought to contain them. They feared that a player who spoke thoughtfully and asked difficult questions might disrupt their hierarchy. This struggle was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, drawn out, and emotionally draining. When the franchise finally moved on from him, it marked a turning point. Lofton realized that institutions, unlike individuals, rarely forgive. They correct, they redirect, they replace, and sometimes they silence. Yet all these conflicts, whether with men or systems, led Lofton to the same realization. His career was not defined by the smooth strides or the deep catches alone. It was defined by the resilience behind them. The hidden truths were never obstacles. They were catalysts. Each rivalry hardened his discipline, sharpened his focus, and carved him into a player who thrived, not only in open space, but in chaos. When he finally entered the Hall of Fame, the moment symbolized far more than accolades. It represented survival, growth, evolution, a lifetime of conflicts confronted and transcended. Lofton stood among legends, not because the path was easy, but because he refused to let the hardest parts of his journey corrupt the purity of his craft. His legacy is not made of bitterness, it is made of clarity. He knew who he was, he knew what he endured, and he knew that the beauty of his game, the long gliding strides that defined Sundays for so many fans, was born from battles no camera ever captured. This is the truth of James Lofton, the man behind the elegance. A legend sculpted by friction, a career strengthened by conflict, a voice that refused to disappear. Every career leaves questions behind, and James Lofton's journey is no exception. The rivalries he carried, the pressure he endured, and the truths he never spoke during his playing years reveal a deeper story than the one written in record books. Now that these hidden chapters have finally come to light, the story belongs to the audience as much as it belongs to the man himself. His conflicts with teammates, coaches, rivals, and even the organization remind us that greatness is rarely clean. It is built from tension forged in doubt and strengthened by moments that tested both character and survival. And now the question turns to you. Which rivalry shaped him the most? Was it the veteran corner who tried to break his confidence? The coach who challenged his identity? The quarterback who never trusted him fully? The defensive back who turned every snap into a war? Or the organization that feared his voice more than his speed? Each truth offers a different window into the pressures that define a legendary career. Tell us which revelation surprised you the most and why. These stories from football's golden era hold meaning not just for fans of the game, but for anyone who understands the weight of expectation and the cost of resilience. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden truths behind one of the most elegant receivers the league has ever seen, make sure you like the video and subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths. This channel is dedicated to the untold stories, private battles, and behind-the-scenes realities that shaped the legends of 1960 to 1990. We explore the conflicts others ignored, the humanity behind the helmets, and the defining moments that history forgot.